Okay, so dating, marriage, these things are super personal, right? But what happens when you throw cold, hard data at them? That's exactly what we're diving into today. We're digging into some fascinating and maybe even a little controversial research that does just that. Let's get into it. So, the source material we're pulling from kicks things off with this, let's just say, provocative quote. It immediately creates this tension between how we see ourselves and, well, what the data might have to say about it. And yeah, that really sets up the central question for this whole thing. What happens when our personal identity crashes right into hard data? Let's take a look at what the research has uncovered. All right, so first up, the research gives us what it calls a reality check. And it all hinges on a single statistic that kind of forms the foundation for its entire argument about the modern dating scene. And that reality check, it comes down to this one number, 80%. Just let that sink in for a second. 80%. Naturally, you're asking 80% of what exactly? Well, according to the source material, that's the percentage of Black women in the US who are classified as overweight or obese. This single statistic is kind of the first major piece of the puzzle they present. Okay, so we have this huge number, but what's the supposed impact? The research claims this has some major consequences for the dating world. The big claim here is that this reality drastically lowers what the source calls a woman's ceiling. Basically, it's talking about the upper limit of partners she might attract. The argument goes that it shrinks that pool of so-called desirable mates. But why? What's the theory they're using to back this up? Well, the research actually offers a pretty specific concept to explain it. And that concept is something the source has dubbed attraction symmetry. So what is attraction symmetry? The idea is pretty simple, actually. It's the concept that on average, people end up with partners who are at a similar level of perceived attractiveness and overall value. You can almost think of it like a marketplace, right? Where things tend to even out. So let's see how this theory gets applied in the source. It suggests that if a woman is significantly overweight, she might be placed in a below-average category, at least in the eyes of what they call top-tier men. And according to this whole logic, that forces a woman to kind of average out with men who might have what are considered less desirable traits in other areas, like maybe lower earning potential. Okay, so that's the theory on the whole dating dynamic. But what about the end game, marriage? A second source we looked at shifts the focus to marital stability. And honestly, the numbers here are just as eyebrow-raising. Take a look at this chart. It's showing the percentage of women who are still married by the time they hit their early 40s, broken down by group. The study found that for Black women, that number is 45%. For Hispanic women, it's 55%, and for white women, it's 60%. But wait, it gets more complicated. The research suggests that even these numbers, they don't paint the whole picture. There's another layer to this data. What the researchers found was this really interesting trend of couples being married but separated. So on paper, they're legally married, and they're counted in those stats we just saw. But in real life, they're living completely separate lives. This, it really makes you question what marital stability even means. So we've got these two different sets of data. How do they tie together? What's the big picture here when we look at this statistical snapshot of modern relationships? So let's recap. We're basically left with two pretty stark statistical realities presented by the source material. First, you have the claim that 80% of women in this community are overweight or obese, which the source argues affects dating through this idea of attraction symmetry. And then you have the second reality, the data showing that 45% of Black women remain married into their early 40s. And all of this really leads us to one final and I think pretty crucial question. In a world that is just soaked in data, how do we, as individuals, navigate the realities that these numbers seem to present? And that's the thought I'm going to leave you with.